The issue of voting rights may not set off alarms for most of us, but the violence that occurred in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, just a few months ago, should remind us that we can't take our democracy for granted. The desire of the American people to be heard led to record turnout in the most recent presidential election. But instead of celebrating these higher levels of civic engagement, Republican politicians who didn't like the outcome of the presidential election, felt threatened by the surge in citizen participation, have now decided to double down. They don't want to just make it harder for certain people to vote. They now want to change the rules for how ballots are counted and who gets to count them. Republicans in the Senate are lining up to try to use the filibuster to stop the For the People Act from even being debated. In the aftermath of an insurrection, with our democracy on the line, and many of these same Republican senators going along with the notion that somehow there were irregularities and problems with legitimacy in our most recent election, they're suddenly afraid to even talk about these issues and figure out solutions on the floor of the Senate. They don't even want to talk about voting. And that's not acceptable. Senator Manchin has put forward his proposals. A lot of the provisions in there are ones that the overwhelming majority of Americans can support. And I think it is entirely appropriate for Republicans now to engage and to look over those proposals and to say, hey, we want to see this, or we are troubled by that. Here's why. Let's come up with something that addresses the concerns of both parties and all Americans. And if we do that, then we can not only repair some of the damage that was done on January 6th, but we can secure our democracy and set an example for the world moving forward. What we can't do is do nothing. We also need ordinary citizens to join in and insist that the Senate take action this week. It may not end up being exactly the bill that is currently or initially being proposed, but we as a people should all say, Senate, Congress, do something. In defense of all these laws, these legislatures would allege that they were trying to prevent voter fraud. And they would say, sometimes just outright, sometimes they would insinuate that some voters, especially those in large urban minority communities, are somehow illegitimate. Despite repeated studies showing that serious voter fraud is virtually non-existent. Since I left office, I've tried to make it a policy not to weigh in on the day-to-day scrum in Washington. But I do want folks who may not be paying as close attention to what's happening to understand the stakes involved and why this debate is so vitally important to the future of our country. We are not immune from some of these efforts to weaken our democracy. And our own history should remind us that democracy isn't a given. We can't wait until the next election, because if we have the same kinds of shenanigans that brought about January 6th, if we have that for a couple more election cycles, we're going to have real problems in terms of our democracy long term.